Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Jeff Rone today. He's an individual that I have had the pleasure of meeting actually last year out there in Sasquatch Summerfest at Oak Ridge. You may remember him from the Flash of Beauty documentary, but he's been involved with many other things over the years that we will probably end up talking about. But Jeff, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I've talked about the Oregon Bigfoot Highway book before and how much I really like to read it, and listeners will probably remember that. But what I just recently found out is that you're actually one of the individuals that were involved with the events of that book, which is the area of road from Estacada going down to Detroit Lake, Oregon. And it's a very, very wild Bigfoot area. There's a lot of really interesting encounters and interactions in that book. So pretty much what I've decided to do is I'm going to try to interview the individuals that are called out in that book that are still currently with us. So Jeff, you are the first one on the docket. So I'm thankful that you were able to come on the show. But let's start out with this. Jeff, what was it that got you into the wild world of Bigfoot to begin with?
Well, I think it was the first time I saw the Patterson-Gimlin clip at a movie theater when I was young. And, we were watching a different movie, and that they showed the little clip, and I instantly was like, yep, they're real. And I think from then, that was the get-go for me.
That's awesome. When was the first time that you actually crossed? I feel like there's a barrier that you cross, or you kind of cross a bridge where you go from, yeah, Bigfoot's cool, to, all right, now I'm going to go out in the woods and try to look for this thing. What was the time that you crossed that bridge?
Yeah, I think it was, in like 2009, everything really took off for me. I know when I was in high school, my buddy Scott and I would say, hey, let's go to Mount St. Helens and bag us a Bigfoot, and joke around about that a lot. And when I was younger, we had a 1 acre piece of property, not too far from Mount St. Helens, but so I was kind of familiar with like the Bigfoot country. It was kind of by Ariel, Washington, where D.B. Cooper supposedly landed from the plane that he hijacked, or got the money and all that. Anyway, 2009, I think things really amped up for me. I joined a website called OregonBigfoot.com. For like $5 a month, you can become a member, and then there's like a chat rooms you can get into, and people leave messages, and you can chat back and forth. And so I met a group of people from that website, and we kind of grew into a family and had a lot of outings together after that. And so that's kind of what propelled me into this a little further and deep. I'm grateful for her and that website. She brought together a lot of good people in my life, and was a big help to me to move away from, yeah, let's go back to Bigfoot, to, okay, these are people in the forest. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. So that's interesting, Jeff. So when you say bag us a Bigfoot in high school, you were actually trying to get a specimen with your buddy.
Yeah, we never did. We just talked about it. We were too chicken to do it. But, I just always thought, we could go out there and catch one. You know what I mean? I didn't have the knowledge or the respect for these forest people back in the day. And, once I started doing more research and reading a lot of people's, firsthand accounts and, and then the videos came out on YouTube and stuff like that. That's when I kind of got serious about, the Sasquatch people and what it's all about. And I met other people who were very wise and had spent kind of a lifetime living amongst them on their properties. And, I listened to people who knew more than me, and I just gained the respect for, Bigfoot, that they're actually people. And it didn't take a long time to go from, they're an ape running around the woods to they're actually forest people that have families, culture, they have language and all that. I mean, they're a people. So I'm kind of rambling. I don't know if that answered the question.
That is, you absolutely did, actually. That's fascinating. So now when you and your buddy, when you were doing stuff around Mount St. Helens, did you have anything out of the ordinary happen when you were in there trying to get something done?
Okay. Well, like I said, we never actually went out there.
Oh, okay. So gotcha.
It was all talk, we never did go out there. And, I know I probably drove out in areas, thinking I wanted to find one. And, I would, well, like for instance, when I got my first car, I drove out to Estacada, Oregon. And then I thought I was like, "Whoa, man, I'm way out in the country." And then the next time I drove out there, I'm driving down the Clackamas River corridor, and I'm like, "Wow, I'm really out in the country." And then every time I went out, I went further and further and further. And I remember one time, it was around 2009. I drove past Bagby Hot Springs, the parking lot area, and I hit a gravel road, and I turned and got all the way down to where another gravel road spurred off of that one. And I got out, and I had to, take a pee break, and I felt like I was being watched. And I didn't walk very far away from my vehicle, and I just got the weird feeling that I was being watched. And I was like, it's coming right from that spot right there in the woods. And I kind of got scared, hopped in my rig, and took off. Well, I don't know if it was a year or two later, down that other gravel road is where I ended up finding this spot that I call Camp Broken Arrow. And it's like another 1.5 miles from that spot I just talked about. But, and then, so once I got a little more daring and had another person with me, I'm chicken when I'm by myself, but if I have someone else with me, I feel perfectly fine. Well, I went back to that spot where I'd parked my car, and I walked into the woods where I thought I was being watched. And there was the perfect blind made from little trees that were probably, 10, 12 feet tall with broken tops. They're all lined up. And in my mind, it looked like that was a spot where someone was tall, could hide in there and watch people come down that road. And that's exactly where I felt like I was being watched.
Oh, that's wild.
And I even took Tom Powell, a friend of mine. He's written a couple books, and he's kind of well known in the Bigfoot world out here in the Pacific Northwest. I took him to that spot, and I showed him the blind, and he said that was the best blind that he has ever seen in the woods. And we both kind of agreed that that possibly is a blind that the forest people could use to hide and watch. So
that's fascinating. That was by Bagby Hot Springs.
Yeah, it's past Bagby Hot Springs. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So I am actually. I'll be talking to Tom in 2 weeks. I have something set up because, just also talk about his new book, but also he is also one of the members of the Clackamas Sasquatchians that were part of the Oregon Bigfoot Highway. But what is? Do you mind spending a few minutes talking about what is the Oregon Bigfoot Highway?
Yeah. Well, it's Joe Bielart his idea, and his co-author Cliff Olson. And anyway, they came up with a kind of made it into a club where to become a big part of the Oregon Bigfoot Highway group, you had to spend X amount of nights per year out in the woods out there. And I think there were a couple other qualifications that you had to meet. And so I was chatting with Joe one time, and he was asking me, well, I guess he was writing the book at the time. And so anyway, we chatted, and apparently I made the grade. And so he put me in the book.
You have a few instances that are talked about in that book that are pretty interesting. I do also, I'll probably end up saying this in every episode where I talk to someone from it.
Yeah.
So the actual route is, so it's primarily like 46 to 224, which are, I believe they're both forest roads. You can correct me if I'm off on that, but this is not just like a, like you don't just simply walk into it. Like there are some very strongly worded, if you're going to go near this area, you need to have your stuff together. You may need to make sure your tires are full, you have enough gas, and you have all the tools. Like this isn't just if someone's listening to this and be like, oh, this sounds fun. You need to have your stuff together. It's pretty far out there from what I've never been out there myself, but it sounds like it's quite a trip to get out in this areas that you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean, you can go from Estacada straight down to Detroit, Oregon, and it's a tricky little highway. You always fill up, you top your tank off in Estacada before you head down, and yeah, you better have 10-ply tires. You better have all the survival things that you need if you get stuck, for a couple nights. Always let somebody know you're going beforehand. And I think the only there's an old ranger station several miles down that road that is sometimes open. It's a little store now, I think privately operated store, but it's seasonal, and they have a Wi-Fi signal in there and a landline phone if you need help. Tom and I used that one time. That's another story. Maybe we'll get into that later, but yeah, so you got to be prepared, and you just don't go down in there, and the weather is something you got to worry about. I was driving around there. It might've been winter time, and I was trying to get to Bagby Hot Springs, and something told me because when you go to Bagby, you got to take 2 right-hand turns and go down a different road to get there. But you follow the Clackamas, and then you turn right where the Kallawash River is. Well, I decided to go further down the Clackamas River corridor toward Detroit, just because there was a woman and a young child in a car trying to make it to Detroit in the wintertime when the highways close a couple miles down from where they were. It's blocked off, and they were stuck in the snow, and they were ill prepared. And something told me to go down there and check it out, and I ended up helping her get unstuck, and told her how to get back to the main roads and go all the way around. And anyway, it was really foolish of her to do that. But yeah, no, it can be very treacherous. I mean, wind, rain, you always carry a saw of some kind, because you never know, if you go down a gravel road, there might be a tree down when you're trying to get back out. So you got to be prepared.
You're talking about like a handsaw?
Oh, chainsaw.
Oh yeah, chainsaw.
I mean,
sure. Yeah, I mean, especially right now, where I mean, some of the ranger stations are closed. I mean, you go out on roads like this, you gotta be prepared, because you might be in a situation where, man, it's just you. But I think that's a good idea to have that stuff. Anyways, were you talking about Ripplebrook?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. There's a part in the book where they talk about the Ripplebrook station and how allegedly there is a log book where they've been writing down all of the Bigfoot encounters and interactions in that area, but it's never been proven. it's just like a little part of the book, and pretty much the author, which is either Joe or Cliff, is like, yeah, we're not gonna go try to find it, but hey, if one of you guys wants to, there's a little quest for you. So I was like, oh man, that sounds kind of fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, you never know, right? I guess there could be, but yeah, probably not. Can you talk a little bit about the instance where you felt like, or you were getting summoned to Bagby Hot Springs? I think that's something we haven't talked about yet.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was October 12th, 2009, I believe. It was Columbus Day. It was a Monday, and working for the post office, I had that day off of work. And for some reason, I got up really early. And I probably got online, was looking up Bigfoot stuff and having some coffee. And I was by myself in my apartment. And I got this voice inside my head that said, "Go to Bagby Hot Springs." And I kind of looked around, and I went out to the living room to see if a TV was on or the radio came on or something. And I was like really shocked that I heard this voice. And it was like, it wasn't a voice from the outside. It was a voice on the inside of my head. And I had actually heard this voice before telling me to do something, and I did not do it. And a lot of bad things happened because I didn't obey it. So after about a couple hours, I said, you know what? I've driven to Bagby Hot Springs a lot, but I've never gotten out and did the 1.5 mile hike up to it. But I'm going to obey this voice. So I'm going to do it today. And I thought for sure, as I was hiking up that trail, I'm going to see Bigfoot. There's going to be a family standing there. We're going to hug each other, and and all that kind of funny stuff. And it took me forever to hike up there because I was taking my time and I was going off the beaten path a little bit. And I was just looking everywhere for clues. I was looking for prints. I was looking for bodies. I was, and anyway, I finally get up to where all the hot springs is, and the tubs, and I'd never been up there before. So I get all the way there, and I just kind of like, well, okay, nothing happened. I give up, whatever. I'm just going to enjoy the hot springs and look around and check things out. Well, I checked out the big hot tub, the community hot tub, checking it out. And then I turned around and looked, and there's a little bit of ground, a little slope that went up of hard ground. It hadn't really rained much yet, and there's a lot of pine needles on the ground, and it was hard packed dirt. And I looked over there, and I could see all these footprints. So I walked over, and I found my first set of tracks. And I got down on my knees. I took some pictures, crappy pictures, and I even sniffed the ground, and I was saying thank you, and and that's how I found my first tracks.
That's incredible. Do you remember like roughly how long they were or anything like that?
Yeah, I didn't bring anything to measure it, but I can send you a picture later. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean they were probably at least 15 inches long, at least. I mean, I can't remember for sure, but I'll shoot you off the picture later. But yeah, they were good sized, and you can see like where they must have been kind of running down that little slope, and they were really. I think I had to take 2 huge steps to match their one step. And you can see like you can see a left footprint, and then you can see like where the right toe kind of dragged on the ground, and the pine needles were moved, like I call it a toe drag. And then it ran down to some bushes, and it was like it seemed like whatever was walking on that ground had like ran back and forth behind those bushes, because all the pine needles were just pushed all over the place. Like it was like somebody got in a fight or something, you know what I mean? And but the ground was it wasn't real wet, but it was damp. And if you had bare feet and you were walking on these pine needles, as you lift your foot, those pine needles are going to come up off your foot, and you can see the footprint that it left behind, because the pine needles were removed from the ground. And so that's what I saw. And part of me thinks that maybe when I was looking at the big main tub, maybe it was watching me.
Oh,
I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, I myself have gotten a few reports from that area over the years. Used to do a call-in show. Someone called in one time regarding that. I think I've even seen some on Oregon Bigfoot Highway, that website as well. What was the what were the sounds of the forest and the smells like at that point?
Oh boy, I don't know. Just your typical
Okay.
October day.
Gotcha. So nothing super crazy. No, like deafeningly quiet, that kind of deal.
Yeah. Not that I remember. I mean, I don't remember what I was hearing as I was walking up the trail. I mean, I think I was so intent on finding something walking up that trail that my memory just doesn't serve me about any of that. I didn't know. I guess I just didn't notice anything weird like that, but that's happened to me before. Yes. But yeah.
Gotcha. Did you ever get to go out and do any research with Henry Franzoni?
No, I never went in the woods with him.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah. He did speak at my paranormal Bigfoot conference that I held like 15 or 13, 14 years ago. I called it Footstock Northwest. And Joe Bielart urged me to call him and have him come out and speak one day. So he came out and talked, and he probably could have talked the whole weekend. And he came to my house one time when I had a group of people over and sat around the fire and listened to some of the stories and stuff. But yeah, never did go out in the woods with Henry.
He was a great dude. I never got to meet him personally, but man, I enjoyed talking to him. Let's talk about Footstock for a little bit. So that was it a 1-day conference that you had put together?
It was a 2-day, I think. It was a short. Oh no, maybe it was a 1-day. You think I'd remember? I think we had to get together on the Friday afternoon and evening, and then the next day we just had a little conference. So maybe 40 people showed up. I was on Facebook back then, and I didn't really advertise it because there was a lot of local people that were going to be involved, and then a couple of friends drove all the way from Idaho to be there. People that I'd met on the Oregon Bigfoot.com, and it was a fun time. I mean, we were able to talk about a little bit more of the weirder stuff, and I think Tom Powell, Tom Cantrell, Joe Bielart, and Henry showed up. But yeah, there was a few people there, and I don't think I had that many experiences to share at the time, but everyone that went there thought it was a pretty cool deal. I enjoyed it. I want to do it again sometime.
Where did that take place at?
That took place at Fiala Farms in West Lynn, Oregon.
Okay. Yep.
On Johnson Road. There's a funny story behind that too. So years ago, I read this eyewitness account of these 2 pheasant hunters out in the Canby, Oregon area I think they were on private property I think the Molalla River was on the property. And I read this account of these 2 guys pheasant hunting, and they were heading back to the Jeep after hunting that morning. And they saw something coming at them at an angle quite a ways away. And they thought, oh, look at that. There's a horse walking toward us. And they kept walking, and that thing was gaining on them pretty fast. And then they realized that's not a horse. There's no rear end to that thing. And then they actually stood within several feet of it, face to face. It was a younger Bigfoot, and they were standing there, in shock. And one guy took off running. And the other guy just stood there for a while, and his name was Rich Fiala. He stood there, and the Bigfoot took one step toward him, and Rich took off running after his buddy, and he didn't even know his buddy had run off. And so it was a very, very well written encounter, and I remembered that was my favorite one. Well, I was on my mail route out in the West Lynn area, out in the country, and I just happened to run into Rich Fiala finally, and the topic of Bigfoot came up, and he was the one who actually wrote that encounter and sent it into the DFRO. And so that's kind of how we hit it off. And then he'd always wanted to do a little conference type thing, and so we did it right there at the Fiala Farms.
That's really interesting. So that interaction literally came up on when you were doing one of your mail routes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. How often would that happen where like you'd be doing mail and it'd be like, oh, hey, you into Bigfoot? Or was that kind of a one-time deal?
It happened a couple of times. I think I had been talking to, well, I knew a guy who, his in-laws lived just down the road. And I remember when we were, this guy named Gene, he and I were managers for Domino's Pizza. And he was telling me about his girlfriend at the time, now his wife, his girlfriend's parents' house was right on the Tualatin River in West Lynn. And they would hear these crazy screams at night sometimes. And then it ends up, I end up getting a mail route delivering to that family for years. And then like one thing led to another. I talked to another neighbor and asked about, have you ever heard any weird screams? And then they said, yeah, we did. The kids used to camp down by the river, and they'd always end up in the house because they were all scared. And this one guy said, yeah, you should go talk to Rich Fiala. And so I ended up like the next day I ran into Rich Fiala, and we had that conversation, and I told him about he told me about his sighting and I knew his sighting because it was my favorite one I'd ever read on the BFRO site. That's
some crazy synchronicity going on there, Jeff. And holy man,
that's just a day in the life of Jeff Rone.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's very cool that you bring up the West Lynn area. I had an episode way back in the day where an individual came on and shared about his experiences in the West Lynn area, and just so much feedback from listeners like, nah, that would never happen. You'd never have Bigfoot in just across the river from Portland, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, that feedback is okay, but it's like, man, this stuff can happen close to bigger cities. I mean,
oh, for sure. And I think that might have been the very first episode of yours that I ever came across.
Oh,
because I heard the guy talk about that, and I think that's why. Yeah, I remember listening to that, and then I think I made several comments in the comment section myself. But right in West Lynn, there's the Willamette River's right there, and there's the Oregon City Falls. They have locks there, for boats to go through the locks channel. Well, and there's the Willamette Falls right there. Anyway, legend has it that the white man used to have to share the waterfalls to catch fish. And maybe it was the Native Americans that shared it, but yeah, I mean, there's stuff, a lot of history of Bigfoot in that area.
I want to clarify something real quick, just because we had a weird interference for a second. So you're saying that the white men would share that area with the Bigfoot, or?
Yeah, you could fish. You could go fishing right there at the Willamette Falls, and so the legend has it that they had to share the falls with the Bigfoot people.
That's fascinating. Holy mackerel! I gotta look more into this area for sure. There's something you alluded to earlier, and just so that it doesn't not happen. Would you the story about Tom in the phone call in Ripplebrook, is that something you can actually share, that story, or?
Oh yeah. Well, let me just one real quickly.
Okay.
I know a guy named Joe, a friend of mine named Joe. He lived in West Lynn, up on Pete's Mountain. There's a road called Schaefer Road, and it's on the other side of the Tualatin River and goes up 500, 600, 700 feet. He and his buddy, when they were in high school, were building a tree fort, and you got this whole side of the mountain, which faces toward the actual town of West Lynn, basically. Well, he's in the tree and he hears something walking through the woods, and he looks down and there's some reggae looking hairy dude walking underneath the tree. And so, this is probably in the late 1980s, early 90s maybe, but and his friend saw it too. So yeah, there's more than one Bigfoot sighting in that West Lynn area over the years.
Did he say why he described it as a reggae looking guy?
Yeah, because it was all hairy, and its hair was sort of braided and all that.
Have we had the discussion about Spirit Lake? Did this happen out in Oak Ridge?
I don't know if I talked to you about any of that, but I have heard other people say that they saw that same kind of hairstyle on their Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's crazy you brought that up. So yeah, I had a call in once where an individual got chased out of the Spirit Lake, Oregon area by a few Bigfoot that looked like they had dreadlocks, pretty similar to how you were just describing. So that's awesome.
Yeah, dreadlocks. Yeah, I had a friend named Dale who told me that he was driving out in Idaho somewhere, and the road was a little curvy, and he saw something walk across the road that had dreadlocks, and it was all dark and hairy. And by the time he went around the corners to catch up to it, it was gone. But he mentioned dreadlocks.
My goodness, there could be something there. Man, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll be thinking about that for a while. Yeah. So what do you think? Tom story?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. The Tom Powell. Yeah. Tom Powell and I went to my Camp Broken Arrow for a couple nights, and one of the days we hiked up to Bagby Hot Springs. We hiked up there, and then as we were coming back down, the trail wasn't very wide, but it was well traveled. And we see something laying on the ground. It was, we see like a white belly and white legs, but you can't see the head. And Tom goes, "That looks like a dead body, Jeff." I'm like, "What the heck?" Well, some 80-something-year-old man had hiked up there by himself, and he I guess he'd bent over to tie his shoe, and he had a backpack on. Well, he fell backwards, and a broken off stick that was in the ground completely cut the side of his head wide open, and he was all bloody. And we thought he was dead, and then we ended up helping him up. And so I ran down the trail and hopped into my rig and went to that Ripplebrook store and called 911, and they so they sent an ambulance. And this guy should not have been driving. He said he almost drove into the Clackamas River like 3 different times. I don't know if he had medication he wasn't taking or something, but it was a wild ride. I mean, it doesn't sound like much of an exciting story, but it was pretty weird.
No, that's extremely exciting. Jeff, how many times have you saved people from almost or probably dying in this area? I mean, I'm counting 2 so far. That's intense, dude.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. I mean, you get older, and you even if you're going for a hike through the woods, you want to be with somebody. You got to have a partner, because like Tom and I were walking through the woods that weekend, and it's hard to walk through the woods because there's so much underbrush and broken limbs and pieces of wood and stuff. And I kind of jammed my ankle, and it still bugs me to this day. And if I couldn't walk, I would have been kind of stuck.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that, I mean, another reason probably why you wouldn't want to go out by yourself in these areas is there's always the possibility where you could stumble upon individuals that are not the most, they're not wanting you to be there because of let's say they're growing things or whatever, who knows. But I mean, you really don't want to be out there by yourself usually.
Yeah. We were warned by the couple that were running that Ripplebrook store to not go up Fish Lake Road. And if you went up there and you left your car there and went for a hike and came back, your car might not be there, or just the chassis would be there. But,
wow.
Yeah. There's one up there a few years ago, in late at night, and there were people and campfires all over the place. It was a lot of homeless people up there. It was scary. That's when I started carrying at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to do what you need to do in order to protect yourself out there. You know, you had mentioned Camp Broken Arrow a little bit. Do you mind sharing about in the book? There's an expedition that's written about that had some really interesting things happen, I think.
Yeah, a group of my friends that I met on OregonBigfoot.com, we got together and met in Estacada and headed out there. Jim DeMaine of Idaho. Let's see, was Greg Walker with us? I can't remember everybody who was there. Sue, and Tom Cantrell was one of the main characters. So Tom Cantrell, we get to Camp Broken Arrow, and Tom wasn't feeling good, and he had some medical issues, and he had a little walker that he used to get around, and he didn't get around very quick at all. And our friend Sue kind of was taking care of him, making sure he was okay, and just looking after him. Well, we kind of set up camp, and I looked at my friend Jim, and I said, Jim, we might be hauling Tom out of here in the back of your pickup. He looks like death. And that night, I think it was 3 nights, all 3 nights. Well, I think the first night I'm in a tent a little bit a ways away from where Sue and Tom Cantrell were sleeping in their tent at. And we heard their tent zipper unzip, and we heard them get out and walk and talk, stop and talk, walk, stop, talk. And we're like, what are Sue and Tom doing up at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night, walking around when he could barely even move, that evening before? Well, you could hear them talking. It was their voices, but you couldn't make out what they were saying. And I remember thinking, okay, this is very concerning. I need to go find out what's going on. And I reached for the tent zipper, and I started unzipping it, and I went, they're fine. Zipped it back up and went back to bed. Well, Jim said he did the same thing because he and I were in the same tent. He did the same thing. Well, the next day, Tom's the last one to come out of the tents, and we had all already had coffee and started breakfast. I see Tom walking down real slow. He wasn't using the walker. I said, hey, Tom, what were you and Sue doing walking around in the middle of the night last night? He goes, hell, it wasn't me. This is the first time I've been out of my tent since I hit the hay. He goes, well, I'll talk to you later about this. Well, it turns out that I think they had heard, I might get some of the details wrong, but I thought they said they heard something walk up to the tent, and then Sue could hear this vibrational sound, and I think there was a light. Well, anyway, Tom says, well, yeah, that vibration's coming from my chest. Well, whatever it was working on his heart, healing up his heart. So that next day, he looked like 20 years younger. And I believe it happened all 3 nights. And by the end of the trip, he was like a new man. It was absolutely unbelievable.
Do you have any thoughts about what could have caused that experience, Jeff?
Well, I think the healing powers that possibly the forest people can do on other people, other beings. I think that might have been it.
It's it's not the time. It's not the first time that something like that has come up in this show. It's very, very interesting to consider that and to look at all the different reports about this happened in my house, or this happened when I went out, and just some really interesting stuff.
Well, I got it. Something like that just happened to me last week, if you want to hear about that.
Yes, definitely.
And so a couple of weeks ago, Priscilla, from Oak Ridge, she text messaged me, and she said, hey, my friend Pam watched one of our videos, the Area 58 museum videos that Priscilla's been putting out. And she said, yeah, I saw the video you just put out. And she said she was looking at me in the video and was concerned that I was having some health issues. And so Pam had texted that to Priscilla, and I guess I texted Priscilla at the same time. So Priscilla was forwarding all the messages Pam was giving her about me, and then all of a sudden I got really concerned about my health because I'd been kind of feeling really down, not feeling very good, and I felt like I was having stomach issues. My dad died of stomach cancer 6 years ago, and it's always kind of bothers me and my stomach and my guts were kind of hurting. And I was getting really concerned, and so then Pam's kind of an intuitive gal, and relaying that her feeling, her message to me, and so about a week goes by, maybe 2 weeks later. This just happened the other day, where I went to bed and I felt my stomach was kind of screwed up, and I remember laying on my side thinking, "Heal me, heal me," and I fell asleep saying that to myself, "Heal me, heal me." Well, a couple hours later, I woke up to a jolt. I felt like my body was full of like electricity or something, or vibrating, and I kind of felt like my whole body just jumped off the bed, and it was the weirdest feeling. And then I don't know if it was like an out of body type experience, where some people talk about how where their soul leaves their body, they feel a separation of some kind, and then when they get slammed back into their body, there's sort of a shocking feeling. That's kind of what it was like. And I woke up and I was kind of scared, and I just said, "Heal me, heal me," and I went back to sleep. And then a little while later, I could feel my stomach and my whole belly area vibrating and sort of electrified or something. That's kind of hard to explain. And then I felt like something, just like there was a string attached to all that sensation, and something just like ripped it right out of my body. And I woke up, I was kind of scared again, and I laid there and I said, "Heal me, heal me." And then I felt the same thing happening to my right shoulder. And I had a major surgery on it a year and a half ago, and I could feel the surgery area getting tingled and vibrating or whatever, kind of an electrical impulse. And then just like somebody had a string attached to it, yanked it right out of my shoulder, and it was gone. And I woke up and I fell back to sleep, and I feel so much better now. It's like I got healed or something. I don't know. I don't have any pains in my stomach or anything like that. So then I texted Priscilla, and I guess Pam had just texted her at the same time. And so she relayed my messages to Pam, and it was just really weird, dude. I don't know what that was, but I feel 100% better than I did like just a couple weeks ago.
That is incredible, Jeff. It reminds me of a gentleman I've been talking to from the Mount Rainier area it's a very, very similar thing happen with the different parts of his body, specifically his back being affected but then healed. The difference between his account and yours is afterwards, then he had to deal with some weird stuff happening around his house, and hopefully that's not the case for yourself. But man,
not that I've noticed.
That's good. And that just happened last week, you said?
Yeah, just a few days ago.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. It'd be interesting if so the area is very interesting, as we both know, and listeners know, because I just talked to Priscilla, and it's come up in different, and man, I wonder. Oh boy, yeah, okay. I'm going to keep that in mind too, because you are an individual that's going up to the Oak Hole area quite a bit with the group. Be interesting if something like that happens to anyone else in the group as well. So we'll see. Over the years, Jeff, what do you think the closest that you've gotten to a Bigfoot when you've been out has been?
Right next to it.
Okay.
The only thing how's that for an answer?
That's cool.
So my buddy Jim DeMaine, he's from Orofino, Idaho. He has a spot out there we call Antler Creek, and I didn't make it out there the first year that he was going there, but I got there the second year, and I think we stayed 3 nights up there. Well, he had set up this great big canvas tent that he used to use when he went elk hunting all the time. And so I had a cot at the back side of the tent, and he had a cot toward the front on the left side if you're looking out the front door. And the first night, everybody crashed, and everyone's sleeping, and I'm laying there on that cot, and beyond the cot on that end of the tent was a dead end road. And I hear this incredible crashing sound coming through the woods, like a train going through the woods. And it woke me up, and then I could hear something big and heavy walking toward the tent. And I thought to myself, oh, they're here. And I sat up in bed, I sat up on the cot, and whatever it was walked right up to the edge of the tent and stood right next to me on the other side of that canvas. And I could hear it breathing, inhaling and exhaling. And I thought, whatever that is, that's got to be at least 10 feet tall, because you could hear the breathing way up high. And then I hear like the pitter patter of little feet running down the gravel road. And then you could hear our pots and pans and coolers being opened and shut and played with. And then whatever was standing next to me at the edge of the tent walked around the tent and walked into the camp. That happened all 3 nights that we were there. So, I mean, can I say that was really a forest person, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, standing there? No, I can't really say for sure because I didn't see it, but it certainly seemed like it. I don't know what else it could have been.
Did you ever get at any time where you're like, man, maybe I should look out the tent? Maybe not.
No. Isn't that the weirdest thing?
Yeah,
no.
Right.
Yeah. It's like well, I sat up, it walked up to the tent. I thought, oh, maybe I better lay back down. And once I laid back down, pitter patter, and then the big guy walked around the edge of the tent and into the camp. And then next thing I know, I'm dead asleep.
Okay. Oh my goodness. I was like, okay, I'm going to ask him next. Did he fall to sleep immediately?
Yep.
Yeah. Because like I talk to people multiple times daily. And I'm also like really good at finding patterns. And I'm like, dude, everyone who has these encounters, like you're saying, it's like, boom, they go to sleep immediately. And like, why is that? And I'm trying to figure out why that is, you know?
Oh, they put you out.
Yeah, you think so?
Oh, yeah. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
It's happened several times to me. So, yeah, it's crazy.
Because you had other people in that campsite with you, correct?
Correct.
Did they have similar experiences where they were hearing stuff and things?
Well, at this Idaho camp, there were probably 4 or 5 tents set up. And, well, I'll tell you another thing that happened one of the nights. After the big guy walked up, little ones ran in, I fell back to sleep. I woke up because I thought the cops had showed up. There were like these lights. I could see through the canvas, like these orange and yellowish lights. And I thought, what the heck are the cops doing here? There's lights everywhere. And then I put my glasses on and realized that I'm seeing what looked like fire in the sky all around me, around the tent. And then I looked out the front of the tent, and our fire had started up all by itself. And I stared, and I think I rubbed my eyes, and I said, Jim, wake up. He's like, huh? I said, Jim, our fire started up all by itself. And he leaned forward and looked toward the front, and he's like, oh, it did. Well, there were 2 dancing flames side by side, just going up from like 3 or 4 feet low to 10 or 12 feet tall, just side by side, 2 flames dancing away. And there were 2 10-foot tall dark beings walking around it clockwise. And we sat there. Well, we both agreed it was like 15, 20 minutes. We sat there and watched. None of us even thought about getting out and, walking out there. We just sat there on our cots. And then the fire completely died down to pitch darkness. And we both were out instantly. I heard Jim snore. And Jim says he heard me snore first. That's the only difference in our account of that happening, that it is different.
Oh, wow. So you with your eyes actually saw these two things walking around.
Yes.
Oh man, Jeff.
Well, in Jeremiah, it took a year for that to sink in.
Oof.
Jim and I would talk on the phone. Jim and I would talk on the phone, like once a week for a whole year. And one time I called him up. I said, "Hey, Jim, remember the dancing flames?" He's like, "Yep." He goes, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that." I said, "There's more to it, right?" He's like, "Yep." It took us a year for our brains to allow us to remember that we saw the two figures walking clockwise around the dancing flames.
What do you think it is that those two figures were that you saw?
Well, I want to say they were forest people.
Right.
Other people have told me that might not be such a nice entity, but I don't want to go there. I mean, I don't discount that it could have been something else. And but anyway, in my mind, I want to say it was some type of ceremonial thing that we were allowed to watch, some kind of ancient ceremonial type of deal. I don't know. I've asked a lot of people what they might think this is, and that's pretty much the best answer I can come up with.
Yeah, that's interesting. It would be really interesting to know if the area that you guys were in had a history of like being used by Native Americans in the area for things like that, or just what the history of it was, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I'll tell you off air
Okay.
a little bit more
All
about
right.
that.
Yeah, gotcha.
I don't want to give the location. I don't want to give the location away completely. But,
All right. I
yeah.
totally get it. When you would wake up the next morning, would you see anything outside that you're like, oh man, well, look at that right there?
No, it's funny because like after something happened. I think every night that over that 3-night span, and like the next morning, it was like I'd get up, make coffee, and start bull crapping with some of the other guys that were there, and an hour or two goes by, and it's like, holy crap! I just remember what happened last night. You guys got to hear this. It's like I woke up and like you forget all about it for a while, and then all of a sudden, bam, your memory comes back. But like after the dancing flames, we looked in the fire pit. There was a paper plate. I want to say a plastic spoon or a fork and like a plastic or a paper cup in the fire. So the fire wasn't real. Although some of the gals that were in their own tents, they didn't really see the flames, but they could hear the fire crackle. I mean, they could tell there was a fire going on, but nobody got out to look at it. But they didn't see the flames like Jim and I did. But they knew there was a fire. I don't remember hearing the crackling of the fire, but other people in the camp did hear the crackling of the fire. But it wasn't a real fire that I know of.
Oh, that is so extremely interesting. Idaho has some weird stuff happen out there. Just weird stuff, man. Do you think that's the one time where you've had potentially a visual sighting of something that could have been like a Bigfoot forest person?
Well, I've had a couple, we did see in 2021, it was July 1st, 2021. Jim and I went to that spot, and it was we had a heat wave out here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it was like 115 plus out here.
Oh my goodness.
And we stayed one night, and the horse flies were so bad. It was just miserable. We got up the next morning kind of early, and Jim looked at me, I looked at him, and he said, "You want to get out of here?" I'm like, "Yeah, this isn't working." And we got, I think it was 0.2 of a mile down the road, following a creek. We see about a 12-foot tall male Sasquatch standing in the creek.
Really?
Yep.
Goodness.
Yeah. When I first saw it, I think it was bending over, but it was massive. When it was bent over, it was massive. And then I told Jim to stop. I just saw a big Sasquatch. So he had to back up a little bit because the trees were blocking the view. And he backed up a little bit. And he goes, "Oh, I see it too." And then it stood up all the way. And I believe it realized there's a truck with a couple guys in it staring at me, and it was exit stage left in a hurry. I mean, it was gone in an instant.
Wow, you're saying around 12 foot tall.
That's what I think in my head.
Oh man.
Yeah. It was massive.
Did it look similar? Well, I'll ask you this. So what you saw that day, have there been any other representations that have come close to what you saw that day?
That I've seen personally?
Yeah, like in media or, things like that.
Oh, no, not really, because, you got the Patty and the Patterson Gimlin film, the female, this was way taller, way bulkier, massive shoulders. I could stretch my arms or my hands from side to side, stretch out my arms, and it was probably that wide at the shoulders. And we were less than 200 feet away from it.
That's pretty close, man.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was pretty cool.
So it walked off by itself. It was you probably would have watched it forever, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, I think maybe I saw it for a whole 10 seconds and Jim saw it for maybe a whole 5 seconds. Seemed like eternity, but it didn't walk away. It just was swoosh, gone. It went to its left and it was just whoosh, a blur. Like in a flash of beauty, it was gone.
There you go. Hey, shout out Flash of Beauty. Guys, check it out if you haven't checked it out. Jeff's in the first documentary, right?
Yeah. That's how I got in there. We got to town and I ended up texting a bunch of people and I called Joe Beelart and told him about it, and he had just gotten interviewed by the Flash of Beauty team and told them about me, and they interviewed me a couple days later.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Did you notice anything out of the ordinary when it walked away about its gait or the way it moved?
Yeah, well, it didn't walk away. It was just swoosh, gone. I mean, it went like floated to its left. Like, I don't even remember seeing it take a step. It was just gone. It's like a blur, a swoosh.
That is
right. And it was standing in the creek, in the water, and it was just gone.
How often do you think about what you saw that day?
Well, I think about it quite often.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't dwell on it. I don't really dwell on it, but from time to time.
Would you ever want to see what you saw that day again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sure.
Did you get a pretty good look at the face of it then?
No, it was like 7:30 in the morning,
okay.
And the sun was coming in. Yeah, the sun was at an angle, and there was a lot of trees around, so I wasn't able to make out any distinct features. It was like a solid black mass, is what I saw. I mean, it was so thick through the midsection and the legs. It was just, you could tell it was super muscular, but you couldn't make out any facial features or anything like that. But it was quite the sight, I got to tell you.
I mean, logically, there is nothing else in that area that fits the whole, like, very muscular, super wide, 12 foot tall, and just glides away, like swishes away. I mean, there's nothing else that could have been, man. Like, I don't know.
No, yeah. No, I know. I've been up in that area before, and saw a moose down below in a creek or a river, and other, saw some wolves and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing like that. I mean, there's nothing else it could have been. Nothing.
That's wild, dude. Wild stuff. I gotta go back and rewatch your interviews on the Flash of Beauty channel, guys. Which you should go do it. I'm sure all my listeners are already subscribed to Flash of Beauty, but they should be. I'll have links in the show notes to that. I wanna we're gonna kind of transition to something completely different. What do you think is going on up in the Oak Hole area?
Well, I think it's a magical place. Whatever is there, it doesn't seem like us humans are really bugging them. I know you've had experiences when you were there last July. And Ronnie Roseman has been going to that spot for, I don't know what, 10 years or so.
Sure.
He has never had a sighting, but he's heard a lot of vocalizations and had a lot of weird stuff happen to him. And, we were up there one time, and Alicia and Priscilla heard these wood knocking sounds. And so Steve and I and their son, Ben, we walked up to where they were, and we even heard some of these wood knocking sounds. Also, and Alicia was walking by herself one night down the road and heard something like step toward her, and then she asked it to take another step toward her, and it did, and she turned around and was screaming and freaking out and ran back toward us. And Steve and I are leaning up against their minivan thing, like, oh, wonder what's going on over there. And so we kind of let the girls just walk off by themselves because they seem to be a magnet, and we're kind of there for moral support. But there's, it just seems like every time we go up there, something weird happens, either to our electronics. And I think Alicia and Priscilla told you about how Alicia's voice recorder went flying off her car and hit Steve in the foot. Well, I was standing on the side of the car at the back end, and yeah, there it went, just whoosh, bam, right down by his feet. I was a witness, and just phones were locking up or running out of memory, and I don't know. It's a magical area, and I don't know what's going on up there, but it's going on. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's affecting car batteries too, right?
Oh yeah, it affects their car battery sometimes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man, it's a weird. It is a magical place, though. I mean, that's really the perfect way to say it. I hopefully get able to go up there again this July. I've
you will.
Thought many a time of it. Thought, dude, let me tell you this. When I got back from there, I was having the most vivid dreams about that place. It was insanity. Oh, wow. I've never had vivid dreams like that, to the point where like I could see things like walking around in the meadow, and dude, it was messing with me for a few weeks. Some really weird stuff, Jeff. But yeah, it definitely once you've been
it'll follow you, it'll stick with you.
Yeah, once you've been in that area, you're like, I gotta go back. It's kind of like, do you remember the old show Lost that was out? Like,
I don't think I ever saw that.
Oh man, you never saw it? Okay. Well, okay, here's a spoiler. For anyone who hasn't seen Lost, skip ahead. But so they're trying to get off this island, and then they get off the island, and then they're like, oh, we got to go back, and then they try to get back to this place. It's like, it just draws you back in. And I've talked to other people that have been up to that area, and they're having the same thing. They're like, they're just being drawn back in. I'm like, well, don't go by yourself, go with someone else just in case, because you're way, way out there. Right.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's exactly how Camp Broken Arrow was for me, and Antler Creek up in Idaho. You're drawn to it. I mean, you miss it. You need it. It's like a part of you is there.
Do I need to cut out the name in Idaho?
The name? No, okay. It's not really called it. Antler Creek is that's a made up name.
That's the thing I love about Bigfooting, is that people in the Bigfoot, we always have our made up names for areas. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have the location. I sent you the location.
Right. Yeah, you did. Yep.
But yeah. It's just magical. I tell you.
Good stuff. Jeff, it has been a pleasure to have you on this show. I mean, we've talked about so many different things, and it's been really fun to see, to be able to get your whole story. And other people may have already known the whole Jeff story, but now I have much more than just an individual I met at Oak Ridge. So it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. You got the tip of the iceberg.
Well, all right.
We
Well, maybe we'll have to talk again sometime. But is there anything that you if people want to reach out to you or follow what you're doing or anything like that you want to shout out?
Well, I mean, I have a YouTube channel, but it's not really dedicated to anything other than just silly things that I post. But I would say if people wanted to follow Priscilla and Alicia's website, Area 58 Museum on YouTube, you can find me there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like they do these awesome vlogs where they go out, and there's plenty of Jeff stuff in those vlogs. So if people are like, man, I want to watch Jeff get into some adventures, I mean, that's the place to do it. So make sure you subscribe over there. So yeah,
we mainly just go out there and goof off and then have fun and nothing too serious. But we're gonna so I think when the weather gets nicer, we'll do a little bit more serious type stuff with the YouTube channel up there at Oak Hole. But you never know what you're going to run into on the way home, like a big blue cloud of smoke.
Oh man, yeah. That's a little in joke for those that watch the channel. But are you going to be at the Oak Ridge Sasquatch Summerfest maybe, Jeff?
Oh, I am for sure.
Oh, awesome. Well, hey, there you go, guys. If you want to say hi to Jeff, you can probably find him around that festival this year in July 11th through 12th. But man, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on this afternoon and for sharing what you've experienced over the years. It's been a pleasure.
No, you're very welcome. I had fun. Thanks.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.
Well, July 1st, 2021, I'm in Idaho with my buddy Jim, which you'll see, here's his rig. Anyway, just a couple minutes ago, I saw a huge, giant Sasquatch standing right there. I only saw it for a second or two through the trees as we drove by. Then Jim backed up and he caught a glimpse of it, and then it was gone. It was a Sasquatch. It was huge, just huge, massive shoulders, and it must have been at least 10 feet tall. But anyway, it's pretty exciting. That's all I got.